Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another jam-packed episode of Club Grubbery. Johnny, it will be jam-packed today because in about 30 minutes we'll be joined by an incredible guest that's got an unbelievable story to tell. And it was timely for us to get our next guest on with Julie Sladden, who is, of course, a doctor from Tasmania, who's been at the forefront of this craziness in the last 5 years. And she's also a counsellor with the West Tamar Council, and she's been at the forefront politically in every way possible. She's been heavily involved in resolving medical tyranny issues, and great to have you back on, Julie. We love having you on.
Always love talking to you guys, and it's great to be here.
It is good to have you here, especially given our guest who will be joining us in half an hour, but we'll discuss that when we get there. Johnny Larder, what's been happening in your world before we get into what's going on with Julie?
Oh, just the usual stuff, Woody. I've been trying to get some action on the police guys, so still fighting that cause there. So let's hope that there's some good news in the background there, waiting to surface. And yeah, there's a couple of things coming up. Maybe a forum that's being put together by one of the podcasters that I got told about today. So there's a couple of good things happening.
Yeah, I heard about that, and I'll be away sadly when that's on. And but mate, you will give it everything. And there are some really good things happening, but we'll disclose those as the days go by. Julie Sladden, you were, I think you were heartened and somewhat relieved by the work done by Reverend Zach Veron from the Anglican Sydney Diocese, who we interviewed and whose work we've been publishing. It would appear, although it's been hard yards and it's only small goings at the moment for him, that he has made an impact in the Sydney Diocese of the Anglican Church about that church's response to COVID. And I think the heartening thing out of the interview that we did with Zach was the fact that the Archbishop of Sydney said that when it was moved that they shouldn't be even discussing this matter, and he basically stood up and said we'd be crazy if we didn't. That was really uplifting. How do you feel about what's going on in the Anglican Church, and how does that fit in? I know you're a Christian lady. Um, how do you resolve what's gone on in the last 5 years with churches in general? I mean, we've been covering it pretty heavily in the last month.
Mm. When I first saw the published response in referred to in the Cauldron Pool article, it was relief. Just an abundant relief, which is my favorite emotion. I've got to say, we've been fighting so hard, so long to get some of these issues addressed. Both in political spheres, health spheres, and for those of us that are Christians, also in our church spheres as well. And I watched the interview between Zach and my good friend Liz Evans. It was a great interview, really, really good discussion.
Mm.
And one of the things that Liz reiterated was, it was where the church should have actually been stepping into this space, the pushback against the government overreach. And, here we are now, 2026, 6 years down the track from when the whole debacle started, 5 years at least since, things were just really, really awful and grim. If we, to actually see stuff start trickling out in form of a official response, official discussion, was a relief because, I'm looking down the track thinking, how long are we going to have to wait for this? Because those of us who have been speaking out are yet to be proven wrong on many of the things that we were saying then, as disappointing as it is, because we wish we were wrong, but unfortunately, much harm was done during the whole COVID debacle, and unless there's a full reckoning of all of the costs of the responses, we are deemed to do that all again. And we haven't even begun to address the mess that was created last time, and that will be more poignant in our discussion later on.
It certainly will. How important, Julie, is liberty of conscience?
Well, hugely important. I mean, as a Christian, there are several verses in the Bible that speak about, well, if my conscience tells me not to do this, with things that are sort of more interpretive based, like, I shouldn't eat this, or I shouldn't do that, then that if their conscience doesn't allow, and if I had my Bible in front of me right now, I'd look the verse up. If my conscience says that, that this isn't good for me, this particular thing, then I should have the freedom to do that. And I shouldn't have let my conscience infringe on somebody else's conscience. We saw that a reversal of that played out in an extreme version of that played out during the COVID debacle. In that, my conscience says that you should get vaccinated to protect me, which we knew was a complete lie. Anyway, it was just not possible with respiratory vaccines the way they are. They don't protect other people; they protect the person if they do that. So many of the things that were purported to be protecting, to be for the greater good and to be protecting others, and the whole idea of love your neighbor by doing this thing was proven to be untrue as well. And you may recall, I mean, Hoodie, you and Johnny interviewed my pastor at the time, Pastor Andrew Corbett, who came on and quite early was one of the first people that I can remember from any church to actually apologise publicly for for preaching, well, not preaching get the vaccine, but saying, loving your neighbor by getting the vaccine, you are essentially loving your neighbor. And he very openly and honestly discussed his experience, most personal experience of what happened, but also just the ramifications of that. And I think each person has within the church, we all have to work these things out. But if there's no discussion happening at the various levels, the leadership, the in the community groups and fellowship groups, then we're just deemed to brush it all under the carpet and pretend nothing's happened. Meanwhile, the churches continue divided, the hurts are unaddressed, and as for the breaches of trust, well, we know how that's going.
How's Andrew's health at the moment? He has been sick, hasn't he?
Yeah, he was actually very unwell there for a while, and they weren't sure whether he was long for this earth, and he was forced to, unfortunately, because of his injury, was forced to step down from the Pope being pastor at our church. And he's actually now moved and is actually studying at the moment. I saw him recently. He's doing very well. And he's actually, for there are many people who have been vaccine injured who reach a period of stability or actually improve, but we know that many are not improving, are actually getting worse. But I'm happy to report that last time I saw Andrew, he was looking much better, and yeah, that was very encouraging to see.
Had he accepted that he was vaccine injured?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yeah. When we also for the West Hammer Council, when we moved the DNA contamination motion, and we had about 150 people come and support that motion, which was the most I think council had ever had turn up. We had about, from memory, about half a dozen healthcare practitioners speak. And also Pastor Andrew spoke at that meeting, and said there in the public record that he'd been vaccine injured, and yeah, so he was not backwards in sort of saying how things were and what his experience had been.
Mm.
Which is something because he admitted he was promoting it in the church pretty heavily. So, Johnny,
Yeah, Julie, coming from a doctor's perspective, I'm not sure that there's been a lot of disclosure around the origin or the background, especially of these mRNA vaccines, in terms of the aborted fetus cells and the use of that to develop this technology. Uh, could you maybe just give your thoughts on that? And also, it seems odd to me that the churches, when you think of swearing on the Bible in court, it's been long held that that is uh, like a requirement. It fits obviously within the community as an accepted practice of faith and telling the truth. But these churches went missing. They didn't uphold the truth, and they certainly didn't fight for people's human rights during that COVID period.
No, you're absolutely right. I think that was a shock to many of us, really. Although we have, I think, to a certain extent, see that play out a little bit in more recent times with some of the cultural issues that they're having to deal with. And, that too has reiterated to me that the church needs to grow a backbone very quickly because whether they like it or not, these battles are coming to their front doorstep and they can't avoid it because there are people who squarely want to make the church do or not do things. So they can't. Yeah, I don't think that's an option to not stand up. And also there are people every day have to leave their church. They leave their homes, go into their workplace. They've got to work in those cultural environments as well. So it's just a luxury that churches can't afford to not do that. So I think they need to strengthen their backbone, their gird their shaking knees, and yeah, be prepared for more of the same. And very very much, COVID was a preparation, a big reveal also on the state of the church. And I think in Australia too, I mean, I've thought about this a lot, and if you've got any answers, please let me know. But why, mind you, Australia wasn't the only country, but how is it that we quite so easily fell into a position where the government had uh, so much say in what was done in people's everyday lives, but also in their churches. And you often hear the phrase. Uh, Church and state, should be separated. Separation of church and state. Well, the original notion of that was from church not interfering with the state, not the other way around. From my gathering of the history of that, but government has well and truly stepped into the lane of the church over the last decade or so, I would say, possibly even longer, and that was very much revealed uh, during COVID. And I think if we're not careful, that more of that is coming. I don't think that's answered your question. I sort of went off on a bit of a side tangent, but yeah, you'll have to take me back to the first part of the question, Johnny.
Just in relation to the aborted fetus cells and medical staff certainly not disclosing what's in the products in terms of the contents, but how they're made to people that hold religious beliefs would certainly be a large factor in whether they wanted to pursue those vaccines.
Yeah, 100%. I remember listening to it. Could have been on that interview with Liz and Zach, where somebody said, "Oh well, when somebody said the Pope said it was okay, so therefore it's okay." Well, if somebody's conscience doesn't allow them to use a product, and my conscience would be like that. As soon as I found out there were aborted fetal cells used in, and I'm going to go back a little bit in my past here, in vaccine manufacture. That's when I started looking at, oh, well, what else do they use it in? I didn't know about that. When was anybody going to tell me? And, so they've been using aborted fetal cells in vaccine manufacture for quite a long time. Not all of the vaccines are used, but there are quite a few lines. And I think there's a couple of websites which I can certainly provide you with later on where people can go and look up, which vaccines use those cells in development because people who have a pro-life stance, they want to know that whether they're using a product that, a baby's cells were used to develop that product. And there's so much of that that's gone on. There's so much, the mRNA vaccines, I mean, virtually nobody knew what was in them anyway. I mean, we're still combing through the information that, we've been given over time. But do you remember when people were showing those package inserts from the vaccine boxes and they were blank?
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And if you look at any vaccine product excipient list, it's quite the read, really. And I think, if nothing else, this whole debacle has made people actually take a long, closer, hard look at, well, what is exactly in here, and why are things in here? Aluminium in vaccines, and mercury, which isn't in Australian vaccines anymore, but polysorbate 80, that's linked with ovarian failure, and things like that. So when you think about it, who's been giving informed consent to anything, really? I don't
Nobody
know.
could have.
Yeah.
Nobody could
Just
have
like to
because
reiterate, I'm a retired medical doctor now, recovering.
recovering. Are you ever going to go back to medicine?
Well, I handed in my registration a couple of years ago during the first state election.
Yeah.
I realised that I probably couldn't go back. But politics is sort of, when I go into something, I go in both feet, Hoodie and,
Yeah.
Johnny. I just, we just jump in, and we
Yeah.
work the rest out, as we go along. So no turning back. I burn my bridges.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Johnny might have too.
I think there's too many bridges burnt.
I don't think he burnt the bridge. I think he obliterated it. But anyway,
You blew it
in
up,
his
didn't you?
in his usual style, he did a Donald Trump. He did a, what was it, Midnight Hammer, a Midnight Hammer with the big B2 on the bridge. Um, Crazy stuff. And look, speaking of crazy stuff, Julie, we've been starting to push again for the infected blood scandal. Infected Blood Australia has been doing a lot of work over many, many years trying to get justice for the victims of tainted blood products in Australia. It's been 40 years. And the reason we've come to that position now, because there's so many agendas, we know that. But I was interviewed in New Zealand this morning on Reality Check Radio, and the position that we're starting to see is if we walk past a bad standard, we're accepting that standard. And when we accept that, oh, that was 40 years ago, those people who've lost a lot of their loved ones, who are still dying, who are still living in the aftermath of that medical disaster, which was clearly not only negligent, it was criminally negligent. They knew that they were letting people have HIV-infected blood products. Then if we're going to walk past that, how can we expect anybody to take the case of vaccine-injured people seriously? So we interviewed Dr. Mel McCann the other night, and her case is going ahead with a lot more vigor now. She's got a fresh legal team, and her approach to the whole thing is unbelievable. Her approach is we shouldn't leave anyone on the battlefield, and so that's why I think it's important for all of us to think, if we're going to see justice for COVID vaccine victims, we've got to make sure that the people of past medical injustices are supported as well. And so in the interest of not leaving anyone on the battlefield, we were approached a couple of days ago. Someone in Tasmania, Trishy, sent us a post that was put up by a lady called Laure Lowe. Now, Laura is an incredible lady. I've had a chat with her this morning, and we're about to bring her onto the program. She and her family are the epitome of how these things go wrong and why they should be rectified instantly. So I think what we'll do now is bring Laura in, and we'll show a little video clip as well. Are we all happy for that, guys?
Yep. Bring it on.
Hello, Laura.
Hello, how you going?
Good, sweetheart. We are recording. We've just done a little intro for you,
Thank
and
you.
we're just so grateful that you've given us your time. We know you're a busy mum. You've got a real story to tell. But before you tell your story, I want to show a video clip that you put up, which has really pulled on the heartstrings of so many people. I've watched it 5 times this afternoon, and it breaks my heart. And I think it should be compulsory viewing for every politician and bureaucrat But I want to make sure that you know everyone on the screen. So sitting alongside you on the screen is Dr. Julie Sladden, who's an absolute angel. We've talked about Julie and to Julie for years now, and Julie has a very keen interest, given that she's a Tasmanian, and she's been fighting for justice on these issues for so long, to be part of this conversation. And sitting in front of the old red duster is my mate paramedic John Larter,
Hello.
who. So we're here in your corner, sweetie. We're all in the one trench together, and we just want to have this be a conversation. We know that it's a difficult conversation, but it's a conversation between friends.
Yeah.
So before we go any further, I just want to share this video.
Go fast. Oh shit.
That's why we've got to keep doing what we're doing.
Yes, it's certainly something I have not wanted to have to post or have to get to doing this, but I just felt like there was no other option. Mum's carers were coming to me saying, this is not right. This is, what she's going through each and every day is just pure, negligence, and something needs to be done, because otherwise the options that the doctors are wanting to go down was just, to send her away off to aged care, or, go away or pass away type scenario. We just didn't really feel like what else do we do?
Well, we were just talking about not leaving anyone on the battlefield before you came on screen.
Yeah.
And that is why when people say to us, "What are you guys still going on about this for?" That's why.
Yeah.
We cannot walk past the injured on the battlefield and leave them there. We cannot. It's a moral obligation to all of us to stand up, and it takes courage to do what you've done.
Yeah.
And we honour that courage, and we want to support that with everything that we've got, with continued updates and continued pressure as much as we can mount it. So tell us, take us back to the beginning of the video clip. I mean, your mum looks like a real wag. She looks like she's the life of the party. She's a beautiful lady.
Yes.
She's obviously a great mum and a wonderful grandmother. Take us back and start with your story as well, because you're in a very difficult situation personally.
Well, I feel like it started off with myself. Like, Mum had, I think, previously had I think she had 2 AstraZeneca and had no reaction. And I went and had the Pfizer vaccine in August of I think 2022 or 21 when they were rolling out. And I was a bit apprehensive, but again, didn't really trust my gut. I feel like now, with the knowledge that I've got, I pieced together perhaps neurological things that I had going on in my early 20s, which could be part of, having previous vaccines and things like that from, the flu vaccine and things, because I had a similar type thing happen around that time when I had a flu vaccine. But, in this particular time, there was so much pressure on us, and, at the end of the day, I did what I thought was right. And, you're going to your doctor, talking to them about it. And of course they were advocating for it. So, you're doing what, the people that you're supposed to trust in this instance. But yeah, I went and had my first vaccine, and I went to the waiting room after having it and immediately had this sensation come over me. And all I can explain it is that someone was like pressing my off button. I just kind of felt like I was like powering down, and I immediately went into panic, and I jumped up out of my seat and I ran straight back to the nurse that, I'd had the vaccine with, and I said, something's wrong. And, she was fabulous. She sat me down, talked me through it. She was like, it's all right. You've been, worried about having it, this is a perfect reaction. And then this is when, day one is when this situation started. Basically, this nurse came in telling me off that I needed to get my anxiety under control, and that she was giving me this story about how paramedics, when they're worried about going to a, particularly stressful scene, they have sugar on the way. So that helps them have the come down. And she was giving me this big thing that it was basically my fault that I was having this reaction. And then I was, sent out the door. So, stupidly enough, the next time when I went to get the second dose, I went and had my doctor's orders, crunchy bar on the way, and, to get my sugar levels up. And I went and had this second vaccine, and that's when a lot of my issues started. I started to get the heart palpitations coming out my, feeling like it was coming out of my throat. The neurological side effects, I was having tremors. I was having feelings like there was pins and needles, and like my fingers were on fire, like zapping. I was having internal tremors, external tremors, just burning sensations, these terrible headaches, which I couldn't get my head off the pillow, this crippling fatigue where, I remember getting the boys ready for school one morning and I'd forgotten a particular part of their uniform, and just the thought of having to walk 10 meters down my hallway to grab this particular item of clothing, I just remember just thinking I just didn't have it in me. And yeah, it was just very scary. I was driving to work one day and I had numbness all down my left side of my arm. I was having all the typical signs that you would associate potentially to a heart attack. So I took myself to the hospital, and again, just told it was anxiety. I think I went to my doctor multiple times, was told it was anxiety. Meanwhile, having all these terrible, frightening symptoms that I've never experienced before. Prior to this, I was a 29-year-old, had taken up running like every other person in Australia over the COVID lockdown, and I loved, running, being fit, doing exercise, being healthy, and to then feel like that was pretty much came down over me overnight was just horrifying. And then, of course, it just, progressed from there. The many doctor visits, going there, begging for help, something's not right. Doctors getting angry at me because I wasn't taking the sertraline that they, recommended. And then I think I was even on escitalopram at one point, and, I was taken off that because I was having these massive adrenaline rushes in the middle of the night, which I would run outside, try and put my feet in the grass, and I was having like my whole limbs were like twitching down to my knees. Like it was absolutely frightening. So they took me off that because I thought it was serotonin syndrome. But then I remember one day coming across the Jab Injuries Australia page on Instagram, and I was scrolling through there, and that's when I was reading all these posts, and of course I'd known it in myself that it was the vaccine that caused this. Reading these posts about people experiencing things exactly what I was going through just sent pure acid through my body, that I was like, this is real. This is something's going on, and there's damage. Like, it was just not I knew it wasn't anxiety. And that's when, I started advocating for myself more and trying to put it forward that this is been since I've had this vaccine. And these are all people with the same stories. Like one day I remember having this terrible crippling chest pain, and then out of nowhere I got this lightning strike feeling at the back of my neck, which, feels like when you rick your neck. And I had this awful feeling over me, and then I laid down and I couldn't feel my legs. and I was wiggling my legs around and I couldn't feel my legs. And I just went into panic again because I was like, why can't I feel it? And then luckily the sensation came back pretty quick. But yeah, there was a lot of very frightening neurological symptoms, and which turned out to be after I advocated and pushed. I remember one day going to a GP and I said, I need to see a cardiologist. I need to see a cardiologist. And she said, well, how long has this been going on for? And I said, and this particular flare had been, 24 hours or something. And she laughed at me and said, oh, why are you only just seeing us now? And I said, I've been coming for months. And she reluctantly sent this referral off. And luckily I got a fabulous cardiologist, at the age of 30, sitting around a waiting room of elderly, and just can't believe that you're there as well. I got this diagnosis of pericarditis, which even after that diagnosis, I went back to my GP and he said that I had nothing wrong with me, just take some ibuprofen. So,
Julie Sladden, I think there's a perfect segue into you coming into this conversation now. It would appear from a lot of the victims that we've spoken to that medical gaslighting is now a new art form.
Laura, listening to your story is just heart-wrenching for me. I'm just so sorry. I apologize profusely for the medical profession that have let you down. I'm sorry. I cannot imagine what it's been like to go through what you've been through, and frightening as well.
Yeah.
And completely abandoned, not even being able to get, to hear that you've had to advocate for yourself so hard to get movement is it's just wrong, and it shouldn't happen. And the double tragedy of it is that I've heard this story over and over and over again, and it shocks me equally each time, because there's a level of something really dark that's gone on, that's beyond we didn't know what we were dealing with. There's a lack of care and curiosity that has just been completely promulgated, and people like you have had to live this nightmare with no one to call on. So I know I can't apologize on the behalf of other people, but I will try anyway, and I'm really sorry it's happened.
No, and it's not, of course, just the medical field. It's, your friends and your family as well. Like, when you're coming and have all these things and, they didn't believe me at the first. So it was very isolating, very, very isolating to try and navigate this and then, advocate for yourself at the same time. And, you didn't want to go to your doctor and come across like your Dr. Google but I've read this post on, Instagram, this person's going, the same thing as me, blah, blah, blah. Like, I never thought I would have to be in the position where I was trying to educate or ask for this help. I thought I went, presented, and, the solutions would come to me. That was very, something that I've, you never thought you'd have to navigate in this position.
And this is exactly why, that we like Hoody, Johnny and I, like, we can't stop, and the Mel McCanns of the world and all the other fighters out there, we cannot stop bringing this up and fighting. I hate to use the word fighting, but it does feel like a battle so much, because the things that there's nothing that's been addressed. People like you and your mum are still living this. There's no active plan to help with treatment or to help address extra needs. There's no accountability for what was done. Nobody wants to talk about it. And so, most people have learned we're not going anywhere, but your story is exactly why we have to keep pushing for, all levels of, both the government and healthcare to actively do something. And, like you, Johnny and Hoody, I get people saying, oh, why are you still going on about this? I said, because nothing's changed. Nobody's taken the responsibility. People out there have still had their lives destroyed. Nobody cares about it. There's no one actually like coordinating help for them. We've got, how many? We've got 479 people who apparently are still in the Services Australia claim, even though we know there were thousands who got their claims denied. And they're just the people that we know of, which is just the mini tip of the iceberg.
Whereabouts are you, Laura, in terms of registering your injury? Was that something that was?
I did. I registered it, pretty much as soon as I connected the dots. I'd seen on this, joined multiple COVID vaccine injury groups. I was on there, resonating with so many things that people said and putting my story on there, and it was quite a good community because they're the only ones that understood what was going on. So I saw on there, I think, to register it with must have been the TGA, I think. Anyway, I did that and I got a call, and that was basically like, oh, so sorry you're going through that, see your GP. Right. There was not, they listened to it, and I said what was going on, and they were basically like referred me off to go find out what to do yourself. And, even our local hospital, I'd found out that there was a adverse reaction department, but when I called about that, they said, no, that's not a thing. I've just, everywhere I've gone to try and get help, just no one has been there to even show any compassion or empathy or direction. It's just, sorry, you go find it yourself.
Johnny Larder, do you, going back to the days when you were a functioning paramedic, do you recall ever eating a Mars bar under lights and sirens on the way to a road accident?
Oh, no, I can't believe this. The garbage that gets told, that's just complete nonsense. It's absolute rubbish. And I, to be honest with you, I can't recall in my career ever coming across a group of people with such varied symptoms at different points in time of such proportion. I mean, at one minute you've got symptoms that are certainly sort of saying that you're having a heart attack, and then a week later you might have something that signifies that you might have something like MS. Like they're just so wide and varied. The same person. I mean, it's just like I can't recall it. It's you might get people that call an ambulance and they've had symptoms that are very similar for a week or a month or a day, but not this sort of blanket of everything. Like it's almost like you're just sort of experiencing the worst of everything for every known predicament. It's like lightning bolts in the back of heads, issues with sensation, stability, people having balance issues, and that's just foreign to me.
I used to take a book with me everywhere, and I used to, as the day progressed, I'd just jot down, what symptom I was experiencing then. And by the end of the day, obviously every day it was quite different, but by the end of the day, there'd be at least, 15 different symptoms that I had been experiencing that day.
Now, Laura, in the middle of all of this with your own health, you're confronted with your mum's issues.
Yeah. So
take us through that.
I think so mine all started, so probably 6 months later, I think mum had her booster around the March. And, I'd begged her not to have it. And, she'd even talked about her friends that had, such and such had it. And she was laying in the bath for 2 days with golf balls under her armpits of the, lymph areas of whatever had swollen up. And, and I was begging her, I'm like, so you just do not have it. Like, this is what's happened, to me, you just do not have it. But of course, she's influential and going to the doctor, going to her friends that are all, all going to get it. But I'm a 66-year-old, what if I get COVID? I'm going to end up in, on a ventilator and blah, blah, blah. So she actually didn't tell me for a little bit that she'd had it. And, but yeah, I just remember, so I think she must have had it in the March, and by the April she was very flat, and she was saying that she was getting this increase of like an anxiety feeling and just feeling very off. And then that's when she must have said something about having her vaccine. And I just thought, well, like, the chest pain and the things that she was having, I was like, she's having a reaction like I did. But little did I know it was going to absolutely snowball into the severity that it has. And we would experience tenfold the dismissal and gaslighting of the doctors, because I guess to them, she was going there, she was frightened, she was saying that she was having panic. She was, divorced, living alone. So all they thought about was that she's this 66-year-old divorced, lonely lady coming in with panic. And, I think mum was seeing her GP and, probably as well as mum, she was quite, focused on the panic rather than the other things that were also happening. She was having a lot of, she couldn't use her bladder, like she had water, urine retention. The neurological sensations, the burning, the tingling, all of these things as well that she had never experienced before. The chest pain, I think she even had a referral to a cardiologist, but she'd gone along and, got cleared. But that's when, there was a time where she was going, but we were getting nowhere. So then that's when I had to step in and be like, well, I'm coming with you. And, this would be a fair, 6 months down the track, I guess, when, I thought she was going to these doctors and giving a, accurate depiction of what was happening. But, I ended up going to the GP and trying to navigate this with him. Oh, actually, before that, sorry, she actually went, because of the anxiety, they took her down to Hobart Clinic, which is like a mental health place. And I told them, I think, this has all started since her booster, but again, they dismissed it. And they actually did ECT therapy on her and all these other things that were, absolutely, invasive, yet me saying it could be to do with the vaccine, no. I just find it even wild when I've suggested to doctors, I'm like, oh, can you start her on potentially like Montelukast? Like, she's reacted really well to antihistamines, like, can we try this? And, the talk I got as if what I was putting forward to do, I got this big talk about that, that's black box, medication and blah, blah, blah. But I was thinking, so you're happy to do ECT, but you won't do this. Like, mind blowing.
So where is she at the moment? That was how long ago?
Oh, well, that would have been a few years ago now. So I'm guessing this is the end of 2022 or 21. I can't remember when was when the boosters were out.
But what was the booster she had, Laura, is it?
Pfizer. So, but yeah, she was just then, it progressively got worse, like the panic. So what really happens with her is she wakes up each and every single morning for 4 years. She has woken up at 4, 5, 6 a.m. in an absolute wave of adrenaline. She said she jumps out of bed like a meerkat. She can't sit still. She's doing laps of the house. She's agitated. She's scared. She's frightened. This feeling just comes over her, and then she said it fluctuates. She's like, again, like me, she's like, I never know what symptoms I'm going to get for the day. She's like, so some days it might be the tremors and the full-on, body shaking, and, she was having feelings where she's like, my brain just feels like it's on fire. I feel like my head is going to explode. She's like, I've got this feeling of pins and needles comes over her body, and then she's just got this really uneasy, she's like, nothing to feel, I can't pinpoint what's wrong. It's just this uneasy feeling of like malaise. And other days she's vomiting, she's nauseous, she can't get off the couch, she's dizzy. There's been periods of weeks where she can't even get up out of bed because she's just laying there like, so she's like, my head's just spinning like a top. I can't get up. She's fallen, like all those pictures there of her bruising, she looks like she's been in a car accident. She went out to another mental health place here, and, they called me, and just because no one has any compassion, hi, Laura, your mum's had a fall. We're going to Exeter. Not like, oh, hi, Laura, your mum's okay, but she's just had a fall. We're going to go, take her to hospital, get her checked out. It's just this, oh, she's had a fall. We're going to Exeter. She's out of here. We can't deal with that here. just everyone has this, attitude towards mum that, she's doing this to herself. Like the tremors will, she was in another mental health place and they were saying, they were coming up and basically snickering, saying, she can stop it. She's doing it. Oh, we find it worse that she's doing it worse when we look at her. And, all these terrible comments. She went into the local emergency the other week and the head psychiatrist came in and said to her, oh, you've put on weight. Just everyone just talks to her like she's not a person. And they just cannot wait. They've told her, don't come back here. We only deal with heart attacks here. Meanwhile, she's full on, can't breathing. The shortness of breath, that's probably one of the biggest things that she's been having over the time. And again, it fluctuates. Sometimes she might not have it for a month, and then the last 3 weeks it's been particularly bad, and she's been living with myself. She feels like she can't get her breath. And, she can't talk. Her voice is hoarse. She can't talk. She can't get her breath. She's agitated. She's, sitting there just in absolute despair. Where a lot of people have said to me, these different treatments and things like that are a bit, off course, like it's really hard for us to stick to it. And because when mum is in such a frightened height of emotion, she's just, all she wants is an ambulance and get to hospital, because she's like, I should be going to a doctor to get help. Like, why aren't they helping me? And we're just experiencing everything but that. I could literally write a book on all of the comments and things that we've been told. Like my favourite last week, the nurse told me very abruptly that there's nothing wrong with her, and it has been noted on her file that she is watching scary movies. And I said, scary movies? Like, so you think this, yeah, she's got the agitation because of the scary movies. And then when I said that to mum's like, that's a total lie. She's like, I've just been, in hospital watching Friends. She's like, so they're just all trying to find just something that they can run with to get her out. They just don't want a bar of her.
Julie?
We've had letters from urgent cares, because she's on the because she's got a concession card, she gets bulk billed, but she got a letter saying in the early days we were trying not to go to the hospital when we were going to the urgent care. She got a letter from them saying, if you come back, we'll basically charge you. You're not to be bulk billed again.
This sounds like an absolute failure of our healthcare system, and you and your mother have been at the receiving end of it.
She's got private health. Our local, private hospital won't take her. Like, we just get dismissal letter after, no reason not to. But she's got private health, yet the mental health or the medical part of the private won't take her. Just when we say why won't they take her? It's just she's been declined. No one is helping us. Like, or if she did get into a hospital in Hobart to be looked at medically, but we because she had panic, the next day they discharged her because they said this is a medical ward, not mental health, but the mental health won't take her. So she's just falling through the cracks of everywhere because unfortunately her symptoms aren't aligning with their structure.
So where is Mum Laure in terms of getting her vaccine injury recognised? Have you applied through the normal channels, or?
No, we've not. I find like the only reason we did a referral last week to a long COVID clinic in Melbourne, because obviously at the start of all this there was nothing. And we've just been plodding along, trying to go down our routes of GPs, getting, begging for referrals to physicians, getting referrals here, which, every single one of them, because the referral literally says anxiety, believes from jab, but unlikely. We go into these meetings with these physicians that we wait months for, and he just looks at us and says, your bloods are fine, out the door. We went to an immunologist. He said, your bloods are fine, out the door. They just cannot get us out the door quick enough because, no one's got any curiosity to see what's going on. The best doctor that we had was one in Hobart, but again, she's in this position where she's not coping at home. So the things that they're trying to recommend. We can't do it. It's just an absolute. We're just
Julie,
getting nowhere.
why is it that in the medical sphere that family history is so important in the treatment of people? Whether it be heart history or history of
Yes.
strokes or the like. But I mean, it's clear that Laura's had her injury recognised as being a vaccine injury, and clearly the mother is in the same situation. Wouldn't you think that there'd be some clear pathway to say, well, there's a family history, it's the same drug?
I would actually say too, there are two aspects of family history here that aren't being listened to. The first one is the one that's coming out of Laura's mouth for her mother. She's giving the history of,
Yes.
her mother, and she's not being listened to. And that, like, for a doctor, you always like listen to your patient. By the time you've done a decent history, you know where to, where to look for the examination, diagnosis, whatever. It's so important. It's so very important. So just that fundamental, that was what I was like hearing you say, like, no one is listening to me. No one is listening to us. And that's just heartbreaking. It's a complete failure of the healthcare system, for what you guys have been through. Now, the family history, yeah, you're right, Johnny. We've noticed there are certain people who seem more susceptible to the injuries. Some families, have had, no reactions at all. And I think too, so a lot of it was sort of batch dependent, but there are definitely families who are very susceptible. And I also, know that there were people who, had it because they were mandated to have it, but they were able to protect their children from having it. And they had a bad response, but because they, protected their children from having it, and, they probably protected their children from having an injury as well. And I mean, this is the stuff of, like horror movies, like you were told that your mother was watching, except it's real life.
Real life,
And you know, there was actually recently somebody who told me the story of their parent having a very bad reaction, and so they decided, that they didn't want to have it, and they probably that probably saved them. So that aspect of the family history is absolutely it's crucial, especially when you're doling out a new experimental medical product to millions and millions of people. And I was rewatching some of the clips today from A Current Affair, and also ABC have recently started giving voice to the vaccine injured now as well, amazingly. And, so looking at the very narrow list of recognized side effects from the vaccine, but they didn't change that list over time, to the best of my knowledge. That narrow list stayed that. And there are people who have suffered vaccine injuries, some that are recognized, some of their conditions are recognized, but other more debilitating aspects of their injury are not recognized because they're not on the list. And yet we now have literature, medical literature, case reports and studies that have recognized where people have suffered, whether it be neurological or immune or cancers or various other injuries that people have suffered. So you'd think it would be a part of the government's now duty to go back and revisit that, or the TGAs at least, go back and revisit that list and review the side effects that people have been experiencing. And I think too, with the loosening of the censorship that's gone on, they might get a whole different response than what they weren't able to receive back in 2021, 2022, especially as many people's injuries seem to be progressing and not resolving.
Laura, have you sought any political intervention in the last couple of years around this? And if so, have you attained any of that, or are you starting to get heard now that you've spoken out?
At the start of probably a year into my injury, I contacted someone at that time, and I just got a letter back saying, sorry, you're going through this, again, go to your GP type thing. And then I think, it was just a matter of, again, it was just like another person leaving you in the dark. So I think I then just gave up on doctors, and I started to go to Chinese medicine. There was a lady on the jab injuries page that was sending out people these packs of things that had been jab injured, and she was called the Health Heiress. And I went on there and I got a whole bunch of her products, and I just then tried to take it into my own hands, and was traveling an hour and a half once a week to go to Devonport to see this, very well-renowned Chinese acupuncturist and Chinese medicine. And at the same time, this must have been about a year in, because I'd seen this cardiologist and started the culture scene, I think, for about a month or two to try and calm down the inflammation. But at that point too, that's when I was really developing the POTS symptoms. So then I was referred to from him. I had to see a different electrocardiologist or something. But he was like he was telling me, oh, all of Australia's been vaccinated. Of course, any illnesses that are coming up now are going to be post-vaccine. Everyone's illnesses are going to be post-vaccine. So he. I had to have the tilt table test and things, and I was prescribed the metoprolol, but I was really apprehensive of taking medication, as you can imagine, because of all my kind of PTSD type style emotions around medicine. So that's where I started to actually have really good results in going to see the acupuncture, see the Chinese medicine, and but then I actually got pregnant, and I don't know whether my hormones are playing a role in, I had an awful first trimester of a flare of my symptoms, but then everything kind of subsided, and I was, I've often read things about autoimmune and things can be put into remission when you're pregnant, and I'm still breastfeeding at the moment because I'm so worried that when my hormones go back to normal, it's going to come back. But yeah, I feel like, and that's another thing that it robbed me. Like, my last pregnancy was spent in fear that I was just going to have a baby that was going to be something wrong with him or something. So it just, it's just affected us in so many different ways. And, these are supposed to be the happiest time of our life. I've got young children, and Mum should be, she was a thriving grandma before this, like very hands-on and babysitting and, all this. And, it broke my heart when I had him, and, she could hardly even hold him.
How's your husband been through all of this, Laura?
Oh, he's been good. He's been very understanding of what's been going on, and he's taken me to many appointments and things like that. So he's been very supportive.
Is he accepting it? Is he accepting the fact that you are vaccine injured?
I think at the start probably he was not very obviously educated that it was a thing. And, was, I guess, because I was, coming home and the doctors were saying it's anxiety and what have you. I think he was, encouraging me to be like, don't worry about anything else. You've been checked out, and, was kind, he did his best to kind of reassure me, I guess. But yeah, as a progress, I guess, he's just been, supportive and helping us along the way with navigating this.
Well, in fairness to everyone out there that would hold those initial views, I mean, there's virtually nothing in the mainstream media about what's going on. I mean, we've had Karl Stefanovic essentially alert to a bit of it, and a couple of other radio people in Sydney, but essentially that's it. It must be very frustrating, Laura. You know what's going
Yeah.
on. You've seen it
Yeah.
firsthand with yourself, your mother.
Yeah.
There's so many other people like Faith Ransom down there. I mean,
Yeah.
terrible story.
Yeah.
They're common, and the government is ignoring it. The mainstream media is ignoring it, and yeah, it's horrific.
How do you feel when you see social media posts of politicians and MPs rolling up their sleeve and encouraging everyone to get vaccinated?
Well, this is what I've, obviously been seeing lately, and I just can't believe that with everything that's coming out and all the evidence that there is now, and they haven't learned anything from the COVID backlash. Like, I just can't believe it's still going. I just can't believe how they can still administer it. To be honest, I can't. There's still ones for COVID vaccines. Like, still signs. You go past the local pharmacy. I find it funny that not funny, but the other week we went to a particular pharmacy who the pharmacist has been fabulous with, like, overseeing some of the things that mum's taking, and I just found it crazy that we had just come out of this room having a half an hour discussion about the COVID vaccine and what happens what vaccines cause, and we're going out the door and her next flu vaccine comes in and she's off to go do another vaccine. And I just think, what on earth? Like, we just don't have informed consent. Like, with some of these immunologists that we're going to, their comments going, oh, we often see X, Y, and Z from, vaccines, and we see this and we see that. And I just think, you don't get a leaflet of information when you're going in for these vaccines saying, you could get what is it, like immune diseases or, heart attacks or bloody death. You get this leaflet that says you might get a fever for 24 hours. Like, I just don't feel like we're just not being informed at the potential risks that actually are real and are happening to real people.
Julie Sladden, at a time like this, the country needs more and more doctors like you. Why are so many of the doctors like you on the scrap heap and not practicing now?
Well, that is a very interesting situation that we find ourselves in, don't we? Because those of us who spoke up early, many have paid the price, through being suspended by AHPRA or being silenced for one or another reason. Many quit, like if they were close to retirement age, they took retirement early. Some were out of the healthcare system for a little while now back in, but obviously being very careful about how they practice. It's absolutely outrageous to me that that doctors still don't feel able to speak openly about this, although many of them are happy to talk about it, behind closed doors. But also, I do get the sense that they're talking that the COVID vaccine in particular is not being recommended as fervently as it once was. But I want to go back to that point that you made about politicians rolling up their sleeves, and that I've seen a lot of that lately. And I was going through some government documents the other day, and there is an actual campaign which started at the I think May 26th or something like that. It's on the TGA's website, I think, maybe. One of those websites. And it's a campaign it's probably not the TGA, it's probably Department of Health, to during the flu season, to push the vaccinations. And so I have seen a number of politicians, posting, getting their vaccines or saying whatever. And you only need to look at the comments and the reactions to people. And if I was to say anything to my fellow politicians out there, I would say, read the room, because you're not helping yourself. There is a big trust, broken trust elephant in this room. And if you guys don't talk about it, well, people will be voting with their feet. They're concerned about the extremely low levels of vaccination that are happening around the country, not just the low levels of flu vaccination and so low flu uptake and low COVID uptake, but also the childhood immunisation schedule, I think, is like at its lowest that it's been in 10 years ever since they brought in the no jab, no pay legislation back in early 2020, early 2016. We're back to below those levels. Now, what do you think's eroded that trust? Well, I'll tell you what, they're not going to repair it by pushing things further. They actually have to have this discussion. They think it's been caused by misinformation. I'd say it's been caused by the Australian people waking up to what's happening around them. You don't need to go very far to talk to somebody who knows someone who's been injured or has seen a story like Laura's or the others that are being reported now, and realizing that these people are all around us, and until we address that, there is no hope in restoring the trust.
Well, we're living in an environment of media created fear once again, because a lot of stuff in the last few weeks about an outbreak of the measles. And we know back in the days of the Brady Bunch in the 60s and 70s, they were having measles parties. My mum encouraged me to go to a birthday party because all the kids had measles and I got measles. Now it's a deadly outbreak. I mean, it's pathetic, the level of fear that's being pushed on us in order to be controlled into these medical situations. So we've got to keep fighting. We have to keep holding this up. We cannot leave anyone on the battlefield. And I think as long as we've got breath in our lungs, we four, even you, Laura, even given the fact that you're still struggling to keep your mum alive and to stay in a lifestyle that you deserve to have at the moment, there is still an element now that you're learning more and you've realised a lot more. And I hate to tell you this, but once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. And I think we can all relate to that. So we just want to pledge to you our support in anything we can do. Anything we can do, please don't hesitate to contact us. We want to get some updates from you if you're strong enough to do it from time to time. And we'll get this spread as far and wide. And this particular episode will be aired probably Friday night. And Johnny, have you got any final comments?
Well, look, the only thing I just wanted to add, Hoodie, and Julie might comment on this. I go back to the nurse on the North Coast, Kylie, that we've interviewed previously, that was forced to have the vaccine at work in the emergency department where she worked for New South Wales Health, and she suffered a very bad reaction, had to be resuscitated in her very own workplace, in her very own department. They sent her off to see another immunologist to get some advice about the second vaccine, and they said, no, have this vaccine now because that was different to the first one you had. And she subsequently ended up having a further reaction. Her vocal cords snapped shut, and she now has, at the age of 30, with a few little kids, a permanent tracheostomy. Now, I don't know of any other situation, Julie. I mean, would you've worked in emergency departments. I mean, if somebody came in, they had a reaction to penicillin, would you be prescribing them penicillin at the next visit?
Absolutely not. You'd be negligent to do that.
Negligent. So how's
That's
this?
what I even mean with, where everyone dismissing that it could be, your symptoms in conjunction with the vaccine. I remember when they put me on this escitalopram and I rang and I said I was having these, big twitches, whatever they were. And they said, oh, stop it immediately. And I'm like, so you're happy to say, oh, it's because of that, but not because of the vaccine.
And I think Julie's right. I think one of the biggest failures here is the fact that Laura is being a magnificent advocate for her mother and she's being ignored. And she speaks with, not only the experience of her own horrible situation in terms of the vaccine. But you're looking out for your mother, and the health officials, the people who were there to basically help your mum, are not listening to you, and it's not how it used to be.
And back to the family history, when I have said to them, look, I don't mean to be treading on your toes or trying to do this, but I know firsthand what it's like. Like, I experienced this, and in any other type of illness, if I had diabetes or we had heart issues in the family, they want to know the family history. And I said, I'm only telling you this as part, to try and help you piece together this puzzle of what's going on. And their reaction all the time is, I've had, we're not here to talk about you. And comments like that, like they could not care less that, or, even acknowledge and say, oh, I'm so sorry that's happened to you. Like, there's not any sense of compassion or empathy or anything whatsoever. It is immediately like, we're not here to talk about you. Like, we're actually seeing your mother today,
Well, I hope Carl Stefanovic picks up on this, because he did promise that he was going to interview more people after Chris Nemeth. And he put out a call for people with the vaccine injury. So, I mean, he should be talking to you, Laura. There's no doubt about it. And I've got to say, Dr. Nick Coatsworth, you need to get off your backside and start talking about this as well, because you see yourself as a very influential person in the medical sphere. Well, I'm sorry, you've let a lot of people down. You've got a very, very strong voice, and you should be using the bloody thing.
Yeah, you have, and it's not like we haven't reached out to him, and he's responded. He's responded on a number of occasions, but like Carl Stefanovic in the early days, he dipped his toe in the water and it was a bit too cold and he pulled it out. They can't hide behind this forever. They were saying to us at the very beginning, we can't make any adjudication on what you're claiming because we don't have the data. Well, now we have the data. The data is clear. Mortality rates are increasing. Birth rates are decreasing. It's pretty clear to see what's going on. We're in dire straits on this planet. We need all the help we can get. We need God's help. And with that, to bring this to a close, Julie, would you honour us by saying a prayer?
I'd love to. Heavenly Father, I just thank you for the opportunity to share Laura and her mother's story. Lord, as heartbreaking as it is, Lord, I thank you that you have given her the opportunity to share what exactly that experience has been, so that she might be able to get the help that she needs. And Lord, I just pray, Lord, that help might come to them through whatever resources are able to be managed. Lord, this country is broken. The health system is broken. There is a reckoning that needs to happen, and we just pray for the people around Australia who have suffered these vaccine injuries. We pray for the people who have been advocating for them and fighting for them. We know that they're tired, Lord. I ask that you fill their sails with your wind, Lord, and that we might have breakthroughs in getting the help that is needed, so that this country might heal and its people might heal too. I thank you for the work of Hoody and Johnny together, and that you would bless their voices as they ring out. I ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Laura, you've got a lot of support building around you in Tasmania. I've had probably half a dozen messages from people in Tassie telling me you've got to interview Laura. Trishy, I want to thank you so much. Trishy knows who she is. She's, I think Julie knows who she is. She's
Gorgeous
a staunch
Trish.
Hoodies hero. She's an absolute gem. Thanks, Trish, for bringing this to our attention. We will be continuing to follow this up. So, Laura, please use us. Okay, we're here to be used by people like you. You're not alone. And this is not your fault. You're doing everything you can. So, Johnny Larder, you've often been heard to say,
you just couldn't make this stuff up.
You couldn't make this stuff up. Laura and Julie, thank you so much. Julie, always a pleasure to talk to you. And to all of you out there in Australia, we don't leave people behind. It's not the Anzac spirit. We don't leave the wounded on the battlefield. We go back and we collect each and every one of them. And that's what we've got to start doing, because pretty soon we're going to be one of the wounded on the battlefield. And you walk past the standard you accept. It's time to get our act together and stay out of the trees, everyone. And we'll see you next week. Senator Ron Johnson from the USA is going to be talking to us about massive moves being made over there to stem the rot of what we've been talking about here tonight. And we're getting a feeling that some convictions and charges will be laid in the coming months in the USA. And we pray that that happens. So it's going to be another jam-packed week, Johnny, and I'll be over in the States in about a month's time. No, less than that. I'll be over in the States in 2.5 weeks, and talking at a conference in Florida, and there I hope to be talking to Dr. Kim Biss, gynecologist and obstetrician, who's on the she's on one of the committees that the government set up in order to look at vaccines, and she's an amazing lady, and I hope to have an in-person interview with her. So we look forward to more and more stuff coming your way, everybody. God bless you all. Have a wonderful weekend. Don't forget to get out and enjoy this country. It's still magnificent. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time on Club Grubbery. Bye for now.